this video, we're going to have a look at file handling and how it can be used within our Java programs. We're going to cover today writing files, appending files, so adding things to a file that's already there, reading files, etc. Now, it's really important is file handling, because we have a look at being able to saving data permanently to a computer to different file types. Now, the file handling that we're going to be looking at today looks at plain text file types, or files that can be shown via plain text. So that's things like your text files, HTML files, CSV files. You could even write .java files if you really wanted to. Anything that is that any plain text editor can open, such as Notepad, and if it can open it and you can view the plain text, you can write it, and you can write it to a file using Java. It could even be used to read a configuration file so that an application can open up with specific settings. So a bit like when you see cookies on in a web browser and things like that. Now, Java does not have the ability to complete file handling by default when you first write a program. It does have the package in its library, but it's not auto-imported. So when you first start a Java file and you run it, Java will automatically import java.lang, which has things like all your data types, it has strings, it has your loops, and your basic programming structures. But like with the scanner, when we've had to import that in the past, your input-output operations also need to be imported. But we'll look at that when we get to the examples. So we're going to start with writing files. So when writing files, this will allow you to actually create some text, write it to the file itself. So looking at our Pseudo Code or OCR exam reference language, this is what we have got. So we've got new file, and then that takes the parameter of the name of the file that you're making and its extension. It's very important to state that the extension is also stated there. Once that's been created, you then need to actually open it. And when you open it, you need to assign it to a variable so then it can be manipulated. So you see I've got file equals open myfile.txt. From there, we can then choose what to do with it. Now, using Pseudo Code, that open function opens that file up for reading, writing, anything that you want to do with it. So then you can see I am choosing to write the file. So file.writeLine, this is a line of text, and I can have as many of those lines as I want, and I can write as many lines as I would like to. Once you've done that, you then need to do file.close. This will allow you to actually close the file and save any changes that have been made. What some people also look at is then how to actually append a file. So when you're using your Pseudo Code or OCR exam reference language, when you open the file, it will always go to the end with writing by default. So it will always open up in append mode if the file already exists. When we look at Java, it will open up in write mode. So if the file already exists, you're going to end up overwriting it. If it does exist and you want to add to the end, you will then be able to append it using a special argument, which we're going to look at in the next few slides. So when we're looking at Java, you can see I've just blocked out some of the code for now, but we are going to be using that try-catch block that we've been using previously when we looked at casting data types. Because Java is a secure language, it doesn't like it if resources are trying to be opened but then fail to open. It likes to keep your programs together. So inside my try block, you can see that we've got file writer file equals new file writer, and then myfile.txt. We've then got a buffered writer, which I have called buff, and that's going to make a new buffered writer, and it's going to take that file writer object that we made earlier. We then can write to our files using the buffered writer, and then we save those changes by closing our buffered writer. Well, some people might look at this example and say, well, why am I using a buffered writer if I've actually already got a file writer there? The buffered writer makes it easier to write strings, characters, even objects to the file. It's just a lot easier, and it makes a lot more plain sailing when we're writing our files. If it fails to do anything within that try block, it then jumps to our catch block and prints out an error. You can see I've given it an IO exception there, which just means input output. So that could be anything from file not found. It could be anything to say that the input output operations aren't working, and that e.get message will read that error message and print it to the screen for us. If we then look at appending, you can see I've just highlighted the difference there, and it's that comma true. That will open the file, go to the end, and we can append to the end of it. Okay, and we'll have a look at that in our actual example. The rest of the code remains the same. You'll notice that both of these operations, we've got file writer instead of things like instead of looking at the pseudocode where we could do everything. When you're doing it in Java, you can either be writing or you can be reading with that file. You can't use it for both at the same time. So let's have a look at a demonstration of this, and we can get it working with our code. Let's have a look at the example of writing our Java programs and writing files with them. So I'm going to keep my all my files visible, so you'll be able to see how this goes. Now what I've done is I've imported all the different things that I need, and you can see I've done them one by one. Now if you don't know what the name of the classes are that you need, but you know they're in that package, what you could do instead is you could just do java.io and put an asterisk there, and that means it will import everything from the IO package, and that is absolutely fine. So let's set up our writer. So we're going to do file writer, which is inside the IO package. I'm going to call it file and make that equal to a new file writer, and I'm going to call it myfile.txt. I'm then going to make a buffered writer, because like I said earlier, the buffered writer allows us to write strings and other objects a lot easier. New buffered writer, I'm going to take in file, and now we're ready to go. What I like to do at this stage is just at the end, I like to just put buff.close just to make sure that I don't forget later, because I'm quite a forgetful person. So being able to do that buff.close and writing in between it, I know that I've definitely done it, and that saves the changes to our Java files. Right, let's actually have a go at putting this in then. So I'm going to do buff.write, and I can write my lines in here now. So I'm going to put in a verse from Tono Shanta. So let's go then. So we're going to have the wind blew as if it had blown its last. Now you can see mine has word wraps just because I've got the files being shown there. What I'll do is I'll hide those files just to make it look a little bit bigger for now, and then we'll open it back up again as we'd go. I could then do buff.newline. Now that will allow me to, it'll move the cursor to the next line so that I can then start writing on the next one. But that means every line that you write, you're going to have to write that after it. And that can become a little bit of a nuisance. So I'm going to show you a different way of doing that as well. You can just ignore that error there. It's not. I think it's just waiting for Replit to catch up with me, but it's absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about that. So then we can go buff.write, and I'm going to do the next line. Now, to force it to go to the next line this time, I'm going to put a backslash and then an N. That backslash N means new line, because there's some characters that we can't show when we're writing strings. So for example, if you wanted to put a speech mark within your string, you can't do that because you've actually already used the speech marks. So we can use that backslash character and it allows us to put it in. So that can be things like a new line, which is backslash N, a tab, which is backslash T, speech marks, backslash, and then your double quote mark, a single quote mark, backslash, and then a single quote there. To put a backslash in, it's backslash, backslash, and that will do that. So I'm just going to write the rest of these lines and then we'll run the code. Putting that new line character at the end of each line, because otherwise it'll all clump together. I'm making sure that my spelling's all correct as well. So there you go, you can see that I've now written that line. So let's give this a run. I'm just going to quickly check my configuration because I did actually have a failed recording of this, so you can see that I had already done this previously. There we go. Right, let's jump back to this. So let's run the code and you should see the file pop up on the left hand side. Oh, I seem to have an error here. Oh, it's still trying to go through my reading file. Let me just delete that for now. We'll jump back there. And there we go. Sorry about that. So myfile.txt, if we go in there, you can see that that now shows in. But now what about actually appending a file? Well, I'm just going to comment all this out to get rid of all that red. Now, to append to a file, where the writer is, you can just do comma and put true. And that will then open up the file in appending mode. So now let's put in the name of the author, for example. So I could do buff.write and I can put Tam, and I'm using that escape character again for the apostrophe, and that's Tamashanta. Right, let's run this code again. You'll see that nothing happens. There we go. And if we go back to our files and go to our myfile.txt, you can see that that's now been added onto the end. And that's how you write files. Now let's look back after that example and start looking at reading files. So when we're reading files, you can actually use the default operations that are there, but something that's easier for me is to use the scanner, which we've used in previous examples. We'll come back to that when we start looking at the Java examples that we've got. So kicking off with our OCR exam reference language or Pseudo Code, you can see that I've opened that file again. I've not bothered creating it because I'm going to assume that the file is already created and we're going to read from it. So then we're going to say while we're not at the end of our file, so while not file.end of file. So we're saying that our file object can see whereabouts in the file we are, and while we're not at the end of it, we're going to loop through it. And you can see we're then printing file.readLine, and we're reading the line and printing it out. Once we've finished that, we close our file at the end outside of the while loop. If we close it inside the while loop, it'll read one line and then crash. So it is always wise to keep that in mind. The Java code is a little bit bigger, so you can see I've decided to skip the catch bit at the bottom because that would read the exact same as it would in the previous example. The difference this time is that we've got file reader and buffered reader. We've also got a scanner object, and that scanner object, instead of taking system.in so that we can read console input, we're actually taking in the buffered reader so we can read the file itself. And we can say, right, while the scanner or scan has the next line, so if it still has another line to go, we can print out the next line that our scanner has. So it is very, very similar, it's just more code. But that is how you would read the file. Let's go over this and we can have a read and we can see how that goes. Let's now have a look at reading from the file. So you can see I've got my file there. We looked at it in the last example. We're now going to read from it. And I've already included my imports. So I've imported everything from my IO package, and I've also imported my scanner because in my opinion, I find it a lot easier to read through a file using the scanner that I have. So I've already put my try catch block in because it's the same as what it was for my writing. So this time I'm going to go file reader, file equals new file reader, and it's called myfile.txt. I'm then going to put in my buffered reader, call it buff, and that's going to take in file. And finally, I'm going to set up a scanner. Now we've used this before to take in input from a user. And we usually put system in within those brackets. But this time I'm going to take in the buffered reader. This is just so that I can manipulate the file a little bit easier, and I think for me personally it's a lot easier to do. I'm also going to close my buffered reader just so that it is done and I don't forget later on, because like I said, I am a very forgetful person. So now to read my file, I can say, right, while scan dot has next line. And what that does is it checks to see if my scanner can see another line in my file. If it can, it will carry on. If not, it stops. Okay? So that is a surefire way of getting from the beginning of the file to the end of the file using the scanner. So I can then do system.out.println, and this time I'm going to put in scan.nextLine, just like that. And that will allow me to scan my file and print out every line as it goes. Let's give that a go and see what happens. So there you go, it's taken in my file there and it's printed out each line as we've gone. So obviously if you wanted to do extra work on each line there, you could be able to expand out that while statement and put it in there and put in any other processing that you wish. But that is how you read from a file. So what's actually been covered in this video? Well, we've had a look at writing files, we've looked at how to append to files, and we've also looked at reading data from them. We've also looked at the advantages of actually using file handling within our programs to make a better permanent state of data. So let's have a look at the challenge. This might be a little bit confusing to get your head around, but we'll have a look at how we're going. First, I would like you to have a go at creating a Java program that will ask a user details about themselves. Try saving this information then to a file. In a different Java program, try reading the information back from the file. So once you've made that first Java file that writes data to it, make a new Java file and try and read data from there. As a super challenge, have a go at modifying that first piece of code so that it writes details to a HTML file. Once that's been written, you should be able to find it in your file system, double click it, and it will open up as a web file. See if you can have a go at that. You may need to actually look up at your different HTML tags and how to write a HTML file to be able to do that super challenge.